23dB Production Studios in the Garden State, New Jersey, this is The Art of Music Tech with your hosts, Fela and Denis.
Let's go, and welcome to the Art of Music Tech podcast. I'm your host, Fela, and over there is Denis.
Hi, everybody.
All right. We're on the road on this podcast. We're in Harlem at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem with our guest today. Forget your title for the National
official title is Director of Education and Programming.
All right. Please welcome Ryan Maloney.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, you guys.
All right. Thank you for
Pleasure.
coming on.
Well, you made it easy. I mean, you're here where I work, and you locked me in this room, so here we are.
Yeah, exactly. It works out.
Yeah.
We're also gonna do the ongoing series with Christian McBride, Sirius XM show he's doing. Was it Conversation?
Yeah, it's
Lowdown.
called The Lowdown
Lowdown.
Conversations with Christian. Yeah, we're going to hit that later tonight. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
And tonight's guest is Regina Carter, fantastic violinist. And hear her story. That'll be on Sirius XM radio. But we're here to talk to Ryan.
Yeah, let's do it.
Here you
All
Let's
right.
go. Let's go.
Let's go. Yes, we know Ryan as a friend and client.
That's great.
We did the audio setup for the Jazz Museum last year. We put in a small system, made sure you could do all the things that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Record, do a little video, some live streaming. We set all that up for you guys.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
All right. Yeah, I love watching it on YouTube, and just can't wait to see that grow more and more.
For sure.
And you guys got a bunch of series going, right?
Yeah, I mean, we do so many different programs here. Over 80 public programs a year. So there's always something new, live music, conversations, panel discussions on music, past, present, and future. So there's always something going on at the museum for sure.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. They have a Duke Ellington piano in here.
Yeah.
So they're serious about all things jazz and archiving music and restoration and wow. Yeah, let's get into that with the restoration.
And tell us,
you have a background in
who
that
you are,
as
how
well.
you started.
Yeah, like most jazz people, we come at it from, I don't know, all different experiences and backgrounds. There's no limitations to, what brings jazz to what brings people to jazz, and I'm I guess a perfect example of that because I grew up in a town of International Falls, Minnesota. Shout out to Minnesota. Town of 7,000 people in the middle of nowhere with basically zero live music scene, but it's funny how music and art kind of reaches people wherever they are. And as a young man, I started to be really excited about some of the music I was listening to on CDs, Charles Mingus and Duke Ellington, Miles Davis, Dave Brubeck. And that really set me on my path, and I pursued jazz in college as an undergrad. I taught for a few years in the public school system and really, really enjoyed that. But also through that process saw the holes in the way we share information about jazz with young people, and the fact that for the most part we don't. Unless you happen to have a jazz band or something in school, you don't learn anything about it. And how could we not educate young people on one of the most significant developments in American culture? How can we just leave that out? It's not fair. Whether you play an instrument or not, you should still be learning about that in the school system. And we don't, unfortunately. So that always kind of bothered me. So when I decided to go, I went back to graduate school at Rutgers University and did a master's degree at the campus in Newark in jazz history and research. And fortunately, for me, they have the world's largest jazz archive at the Institute of Jazz Studies at Rutgers, Newark. So through that process of going back to school and doing some work study and then eventually getting hired part-time at the Institute of Jazz Studies, I got really kind of deep into not only the history, but the importance of archives and the fragility of recorded music over the last 100 years, how it's really, it's literally crumbling on our shelves as we kind of sit here, it doesn't matter what format you have. Oddly enough, records are sometimes the most stable format, but even those are fading in a way. So I really got interested in all of that and spent a lot of time working on archiving projects and research projects and contributing to different films and books and things but also kept my connection with education and started working again back to Christian McBride. Started working as kind of an assistant for him for a few years, or maybe about a year, as I was finishing grad school, and actually. It was at that exact same time that Christian McBride's wife, Melissa Walker, was starting an organization called Jazz House Kids.
What year was that?
That was, 2005, I bet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I kind of got in on the ground floor of Jazz House Kids, and Melissa and I, slugged away at it for years in her basement, trying to fill the gap, the arts gap in public schools for the most part at that time. There was no summer camp. Now there's a summer camp. There's evening classes, every night of the week. Back then, we were just trying to get jazz in young people's ears. Like, that was our goal. And we did that in any way we could, beg for money and just tried to build programs that would reach. And we were doing most of our work in the Newark public schools at the time. So did that for about 8 years. It was time for me to make the next move, and that's when I came over here to the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. So I've always kind of straddled education and history, and to a certain extent, recording technology and the history of recording technology. I'm not an engineer by any stretch, but I'm very interested in the process and how important it's been in cataloging kind of the whole history of jazz music. For the most part, we have obviously only a fraction of the jazz that's ever been played has been recorded, but the development of recording technology and the development of jazz kind of parallel each other. So we have like bits and pieces of just about the entire evolution of jazz music, that we can listen to. And I find that really fascinating.
All right.
And let me see. I've done a bunch of other little, projects. When I was in grad school, I was really interested in the music of Charles Mingus, which Dennis, I know he's your man as well.
Yeah.
And
One of my
and that
favorite.
stuff just blew my mind and on every level, politically and culturally and musically, and just the way he played the bass. And it ended up leading me to a period of his career where he was working alongside a guy named Tio Macero, who was at the time was a composer and a saxophone player. He went on to become most famous as a recording engineer for Columbia Records for many, many years, and recorded, with everybody. Literally, he was the guy in the studio for Miles Davis, Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk, Dave Brubeck, Charles Mingus, everything from mid-50s for the next about 15 or 20 years. He was the man.
Oh, yeah. He's in Miles' book.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. He's
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Did he still have gear around by the time, or was he just kind of out?
Yeah, he had some stuff. It's interesting, he's loved and hated for his. He was one of the first guys that was really doing tape splicing, and taking these marathon recording sessions that Miles was doing and kind of cutting them up into making an album out of them, with like In a Silent Way and Bitches Brew and some of these big sprawling albums. Like it was Tio and Miles that were physically cutting the tapes and taping them together and like building these albums out of the physical tape, running things backwards. He was commissioning the engineers at Columbia to build all these machines that would put these different effects, echo effects and things. So he was a real pioneer in that sense. And he had a few things still around. He lived, he had an apartment in New York, but I was working as his archivist out on Long Island, out in the Hamptons, and he had a whole basement full of, thousands and thousands of tapes, studio tapes. And some of it was stuff from Columbia, and some of it was like stuff he had done after he left Columbia, but it was not organized at all. And you'd walk in and you're like, man, I'm literally surrounded by master tapes or like duplicates of masters that from all the greatest albums that have ever been recorded in jazz, you know, and not knowing maybe some of this stuff has never been released. This might be alternate takes. This might be, you know, it had been so long, it had been 40 or 50 years, and Tio didn't remember everything that was there. But he had a few machines kind of stashed away, and one of the stories that he told is he whenever he would commission a new machine for the mastering studio at Columbia Records, he would always get two. And then he could bring one to his apartment in Manhattan because this guy was a workaholic. He worked like 20 hours a day. So if he finished at the studio, he would bring the tape with him home, and he had his own. Yeah, just keep working and keep doing it because it was all experimenting. It was just like, you know, nobody taught him what to do or how to do it. He was inventing. He was making it up as he went along, you know. Yes. So he had some things. He had some old microphones, like this big, like, what do you call the big long tube microphone? What do you call that one?
Oh,
it was like this long. A shotgun? Is that a thing?
Yeah, there's a shotgun mic, but wow, I didn't know that they had a tube version. Wow.
Well, this one, all I know, it was like a tube, and it was maybe like 3 feet long.
Yeah.
And I asked him about it once. He's like, "Oh yeah, I used to record Miles's live shows with those."
Oh, okay, yeah, it was a shotgun mic. Okay, yeah. And I was thinking tube.
Oh, like tube amp. You were thinking, yeah. Pardon my my ignorance on some of this terminology. But,
no, yeah, I got you though. Yeah,
it was in the shape of a tube.
A tube.
Yeah, and it was in this beautiful box, like with like velour inside of it. And I opened it up and I was like, "Man, what is this?" He's like, "I would bring these to live things. I never knew if we would ever issue anything, but he said I could take two of these mics and put them at the back of the room and point them right at the stage, and I could get a beautiful stereo recording just with these two big mics in the back of the room." And so he had a few odds and ends definitely laying around, machines and a lot of that unfortunately, he passed away a number of years ago. A lot of it's still at his house, but a lot of it has also transferred down to the Library of Congress in D.C. And some of it is at the Institute of Jazz Studies, and some of it is at the New York Public Library as well, the papers and things, not the technology stuff. But yeah, a really fascinating figure, you know, was a part of so many, you know, monumental recordings.
What happened to all the tapes?
A lot of them are at the Library of Congress. I'm not sure.
Did they convert them to digital? Or
I'm not sure at what point they are in the process. You know, a lot of times they say yes to those collections, and they will just, you know, sit on them until they get to them. In some cases, years and years and years go by before they figure out a time and the resources to actually tackle them. And they're constantly shuffling their priorities. But yeah,
definitely. You got into restoration as well of records, but didn't Tio have a flood in his Long Island house too?
He definitely had a flood. Here is a little request from a hack archivist. Please don't keep your things in your basement. I know that space is tempting because you don't use it for anything else.
So wide,
and there is room,
but don't put it in your basement. Don't put your recordings, don't put your sheet music, don't put your technology in your basement. It will flood. The moisture content is constantly going up and down. It will mildew. Things will fall apart. It will be a disaster. So, yes, he had a huge flood one year, and almost the whole basement filled with water, and that was definitely an emergency situation. And man, we were trying everything. You know, you can get these big chest freezers and start to freeze some of the music so they dry out in the freezer, and you're trying to pull these pieces of paper apart one by one and save, because he was known as a recording engineer, but the thing that he self-identified as is a composer. And he was a Juilliard trained saxophone player and composer. He got his undergrad and master's degree at Juilliard as a composer. So he spent almost every day of his life writing music. You know, in addition to his profession as an engineer, he was composing music. So he had all those tapes, but he had all kinds of sheet music that he had written for all kinds of things. He did some of the arrangements on the Monk big band album and the Mingus album. what is it? Let All My Children Hear Music. Is that the album? I can't remember the name of it. But it's another Mingus big band, kind of large ensemble album, and Teal was writing arrangements for that as well. So even in the midst of all of his engineering work, he's writing and composing and doing all this stuff.
Heavy background.
Heavy music background. And that's one of the things that I think set him apart from a lot of the other engineers at the time. He was certainly becoming familiar with the new technology that was coming out, but as a musical ear, like he knew.
He knew.
Yeah. He knew, he was really well trained. And that's why, I mean, you guys both have music backgrounds as well, and I think that serves you very, very well.
Oh, yeah.
With your ability to kind of know what to listen for, know how to hear, ask musicians intelligent questions, and not be out of the loop. But yeah, Tio was all over all that stuff, and that flood certainly set a lot of things back, and stuff was lost, definitely. But there's no way of knowing exactly how much was lost.
Oh man! So had you been working in restoration before that happened, or did that spur you on to get more familiar with it?
I referred to myself as a hack archivist. I was trained kind of on the job at the Institute of Jazz Studies, and I had a mentor, Annie Keebler was her name, and she was absolutely unbelievable. And she got her initial training at, she worked down at the Smithsonian, and there's a couple other staff archivists there as well, Vincent Pilote and Tad Hirshorn. And so I was all ready to do the legwork, the heavy lifting stuff. I didn't necessarily have the expertise, but if I could find out how to do something, like restoration wise, or if something was falling apart and they needed help, like I knew who to ask, and then I could go and kind of piece it together and help, because, from that standpoint, those tapes are really fragile, and every year that goes by, they're
dry
so
out.
We were baking tapes, we were dehydrating tapes, we were doing transfers, we were trying to save everything, because the mildew was, in that particular situation, the mildew was actively growing like by the day. So we were trying to save as much as we could, but of course money is always an issue as well. Like you can't come in and hire 20 people to come and like wipe everything down, and but these tapes, man, we did as much as we could, because once he started looking at them, he was like, oh man, I know what this one is. Like we really need to do this one first, and we get it in the dehydrator, and then we try to do the transfer, and he brought in some other people to help, and got in some really advanced equipment to try to do some of the transfers. But in some cases, those tapes, those old reel-to-reel tapes, like when you're doing the transfer, the magnetic tape is literally crumbling off the plastic backing as it's running through the machine. Like you watch it, you got one shot, and it's literally just turning to dust as it's coming through the head of the tape player. So you just cross your fingers that everything is like going to work.
Yeah.
And that everything is like,
it's a surgery.
Whew, I'm telling you. And the people who do it now, I've been the person who, and it's kind of the story of my whole career, but I've been the one who's kind of assembled the right people in the right places to do the job as well as it can be done in whatever situation it is, kind of from a more producer's end, because I didn't necessarily have the expertise, but I knew what needed to happen and how to get the right people there to do it. And so, yeah, we spent weeks doing transfers, wiping things down, don't keep things in your basement.
Key thing.
Mm-hmm.
Key.
Mm-hmm.
Major key on that on the audio side. Yeah, it's because I've had that happen too, and I didn't have nearly the amount of of gear that he had, or the tapes, and it was a bad time. I think I did have a few audio things that, but
and the moisture hits everything. It doesn't matter what you have, that humidity in a basement is going to wreck whatever's down there.
Exactly.
There's a reason people don't, shouldn't be building things in their basement. It's like,
it's going to get rusted. It's just electrical, everything.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. All right. I think that's great for the first half.
Cool.
Of this interview. In the next half, we'll talk a little bit more about what we did at the museum and more about Ryan. Thank you so much for this first half.
Yeah.
Again, thank you everybody for tuning in. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio,
Podbean, YouTube.
Podbean, YouTube, exactly. Thank you for your support. Please make comments on iTunes. It gets us out there more. The Art and Music Tech Podcast. Thank you. I'm Fela.
I'm Dennis.
And let's go.
Let's go,
Let's
guys.
go.
For more information of booking 23DB Productions, visit their website at 23dbproductions.com. Like and follow 23DB Productions at Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for the latest work.